Hi, I'm Lesley Goldberg. Welcome to Showrunner Sessions, our new series from Ankler Media, highlighting the creators of some of your favorite shows. Today, I'm excited to speak with Debora Cahn, the creator and showrunner behind the Netflix political thriller, The Diplomat, which recently wrapped its third season and is already in production on its fourth.
Hal, listen to me. Say as little as possible. Do you hear me?
Okay.
What happened?
President Rayburn died 4 minutes ago.
Who was he talking to?
My husband, President Rayburn, was on the phone with Hal.
So,
Are we having fun?
Welcome, Debora.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here because we have cliffhangers to talk about, and I'm just going to call you right from the start the queen of the cliffhanger. But before we get into all of that,
so crazy. Okay.
I do want to go back and start with your resume, which includes incredible runs on The West Wing and Homeland. Do you see The Diplomat as an extension of those shows for you in terms of stories about civil servants doing the work behind the scenes?
Oh, it's completely a genetic child of those two together. I think that as soon as I finished working on The West Wing, when that series came to an end, I really felt like I wanted to do for kind of foreign relations what that show had done for primarily domestic politics, and look at the processes of like how do countries deal with each other, and with the same kind of detail and kind of interest in process wrapped up in really good story that The West Wing had. I kind of messed around with a bunch of different ideas for a long time, including doing a show that was set in an embassy in London, and that pitch dropped, landed like a lead balloon. There was absolutely no interest in that, and kind of kept trying to find different ways to get at that idea. And when I went to work on Homeland, I felt like, oh, this is it. Like Alex Gonza and Howard Gordon figured out how to take the same kind of interest in politics, but look at geopolitics and, bring those stories to life wrapped up in a really intricate, dramatic, personal story. And I felt like there was a version of that would come from, I have a little bit more of an interest in the absurd in character that I wanted to add to that mix. But I really do feel like those, like The West Wing and the Homeland together are the two forces that created this world.
Obviously your interest in this space, it goes far before the recent headlines that we've seen this year, where 500,000 federal employees lost their jobs this year. How much weightier does it feel for you now to write a show like The Diplomat in 2025?
Well, a lot. We started out with the kind of attitude like people don't know anything about what diplomats do, me included. And when I started learning about it, I was like, these are cool stories. And this is a bunch of broads going out and doing something we don't know anything about. And they're such badasses, and it would just be fun to tell stories about them. I did not imagine that we were going to be, building a portrait of a population of people who were about to be like summarily dismissed from the federal government and the world stage. So it certainly, it feels like it matters more. It feels like it's more important, but then immediately we have to say to ourselves, like, well, we're not going to tell an important story about important people. Like we still have to kind of come at it with the attitude that we've hopefully had from the beginning, which is like, these people are interesting and the stuff that they do is interesting and they're smart and they have really good intentions and they just fuck up all the time and they're a mess and they're a disaster and they're very, very human and flawed and dumb sometimes and self-sabotaging sometimes. And we want to continue to tell the story with that three-dimensionality, and not sort of get caught up in the desire to pay homage to a group of people who we do, in fact, have a kind of a fangirl hero worship attitude toward.
Have you heard anything from employees who were affected this year and who are like, has anyone come into the writer's room, or have you, fulfilled any special requests on that side of things?
We speak to a lot of people who work for the Foreign Service and work in diplomacy and foreign service policy. And it's interesting talking to these people as the world changes so dramatically around them. And we're putting together a story that's not going to air for 2 years, whatever we're writing. There's a 2-year lag time, and the world is changing so fast. And it's hard to not say, oh shit, we should be telling a story about like, what does it mean right now when you and 100,000 of your colleagues are all kind of fired within a week? And the organization that you worked for that is focused on saving the lives of very, very vulnerable people all over the world vaporizes in a day. It's like, how are we not screaming about that from the rooftops? But in 2 years, it's hard to know like what fresh hell.
I don't want to laugh, but I'm crying at the same time. Yeah.
I guess I'm not. Like, I always think I'm going to be subtle about these things, and I'm not. I want to be telling a story that is about more than a single moment. So I would love to be speaking to the headspace that we're in right now. I am sad to say, I think in 2 years, we're going to be in a kind of a similar headspace. So what we're looking for is like, what kind of conflicts will have existed, through the last 20 years of working in this field and will continue to exist for another 10 years. How do you kind of get at the heart of the day-to-day struggle without getting caught up in the sort of the whipping winds of the headlines?
Yeah. So you mentioned you do consult with a lot of people, but I'm curious, season 3 started with a lot of protocols about the preparation and planning for when a president dies. How much of that was factually based? And was there anything?
All of it. All of it is factually based. Absolutely. Sorry, I interrupted you. What was the rest of your question?
No, go ahead. Keep going.
It's all factually based. While we were coming up with that story, Queen Elizabeth was dying, so we were seeing the British version of it playing out. It all felt very meta. But we're fortunate to have a lot of people who can share a lot of the details of the protocol. And for me, it was important to get as granular as possible because we had just pulled such a melodramatic story moment. Like, Hal goes and says something to the president, and the president just drops dead right behind his desk. Like, I was so worried that it was going to be so fucking cheesy and hokey that all I knew to do was like get extremely specific in administrative detail and protocol and who's going to go where and who stands where, and all of that feels very grounding to me. And when we have enough of that, I feel like we then earn a bit of a melodramatic flight.
So was there anything that the Diplomat's political consultants would not share about that process?
We've had things where we haven't had White House people tell us stuff that we shouldn't really know, but occasionally something happens we hear about something that seems newsworthy, and we're like, how about we don't share that? Like, I don't want to break news. I really don't. I don't want to, we talk to people from the CIA, we talk to people from MI6, we talk to people from both governments, and there's enough crazy shit out in the news that we just don't have enough time as a community to absorb. Like, we can tell those stories. And, there's certain pieces of information about security protocols that we go out of our way to get a little bit wrong because we don't want to give anybody any ideas.
Of course. And you're in production on season 4. How does the news cycle continue to impact your storylines? You kind of teased that a little bit, but has there been anything that you've had to rework because of current events?
We reworked almost all of the first season because of current events. I don't know that there's been another one that has been as drastic as that. In the first season, we had met with somebody who was a Russia expert. Her name's Heather Conley, brilliant woman, and has been had given us this really interesting perspective on how Russia for so many years had really conducted foreign policy through the use of covert affairs. They would do these things and then say, "Oh, we didn't do that. We're not attacking you. We're not murdering somebody in your country." And she was talking about how difficult it is to kind of like be fighting with somebody who pretends they're not fighting with you. And I thought that was really cool. And we built a whole season around it. And then a friend of mine who's a journalist called and was like, "So bad news for you and all of Ukraine. Putin has invaded."
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly turned from like what was a passive aggressive foreign policy approach, which he'd been using for about 20 years, to a very, very aggressive. So we did a lot of rewriting, and it did seem apocalyptic at the time, but the idea is always not kind of what's the story that's happening, but what are stories that happen regularly enough that put characters like a little bit lower on the totem pole in really difficult situations, particularly when they have a focus on one country and are representing the interests of the United States, but suddenly they've got such a more nuanced sense of what's going on in one place in the world. And, what's the collision like of the needs that they understand in this one place versus the needs that Washington understands for itself with however many 100 countries. So we kept that's the North Star, and we adjusted the details of the story as much as we could to make it possible to have a world in which the war in Ukraine existed. And we allude to it elliptically every now and then, but that the problems that we're trying to solve are not based in the state of that specific conflict.
Right. Shifting gears a second here, you cut your teeth in broadcast doing 22 episodes every 9 months on The West Wing, as well as on Grey's Anatomy. And here you are after 3 seasons of The Diplomat. You've done a total of 22 episodes over 2 years. When you see a show like The Pit doing 15 episodes annually, is that something that you could do with The Diplomat?
Not the way that we're doing it now. I've never understood how it is that we spend quite so much time on 8 episodes, or one season we did 6 episodes. I mean, I don't know, Lesley, what we're doing. It's taking so
Spending
long.
a lot of money, I think.
But we are making something very, very different than those shows that had standing sets and they went on location, a couple times a year, not, 6 different big schnazzy locations on different continents. So it's a different approach to the storytelling, and it's a different style in terms of 8 hours instead of 22. In 22, you're telling a world, and in 8, you're telling one story. And that isn't the kind of thing that I gravitate toward. I am more comfortable telling, building a world and being able to tell like these teeny little detailed stories of like one character off on the side. I love that. I've always enjoyed that. And I was never like a big sweeping plot person. which is why I find it funny when you say Queen of the Cliffhanger, because it's so not my style, but it has become my style because this medium where you've got, there is a button that says next episode, and
or an autoplay.
I don't want to be a slave to it, but I don't want to ignore the fact that it's there and that there's a way that people are watching now. And, I'm certainly used to it myself. I've realized that like I go and I watch a movie, I watch 2 hours, 2 episodes of a show because I'm watching a movie. Like that's the biorhythm of it. And at some point, I'm just going to accept that that's the case. And instead of writing 8 episodes, I'm going to write 4 movies. Sometimes I kind of sit back and I say, well, that's what's actually happening. So how can I look at these 2 episodes in that lens? And is there anything that I want to change about the storytelling? But then I get overwhelmed and then I just focus on one.
How big are your scripts? I mean, I remember covering Scandal, and Shonda Rhimes gave the cast the instruction to speak extremely fast because the scripts were like 80-something pages, which is high for a drama. How big are yours, and how do they compare to things like Homeland and even The West Wing? Because you do pack. I mean, there's so much dialogue. Not to interrupt you again, but just to add on, there is so much dialogue in The Diplomat, and everyone is speaking so quickly, and it's so nuanced. Every tiny little detail, it's because it is, these are diplomatic relations, right? It's, you're not just, trying to get out of an argument with your spouse, right? It's life and death consequences.
I am desperately trying to get everybody to slow the fuck down. I really am. I'm trying all the time. There's a I don't want anybody to talk fast. There's something that I think is seductive about, you look at a chunk of dialogue like that and you think, I need to survive as an actor. I need to survive to the end of this paragraph, or that there's one impulse or there's one thought that you are desperate to get out and communicate, which can make you want to move really quickly. But we are always trying to pull people back into a kind of a more meandering thought process. Like, I'm rambling on and on and on. If I knew where I was going, this would all be more concise, but I don't. So I'm kind of fumphering around and I'm thinking as I'm talking, and that's what we're looking for on the show. And we are fortunate to have fucking brilliant actors who can do that. But it certainly does move faster than a Homeland script, which was it's so psychological. It's so internal that, my scripts are easily, 10 pages longer per episode than a Homeland script was, but certainly not an 80-page Scandal script. And we don't want to leave a lot on the cutting room floor. And
So Queen of Cliffhangers, each of your first 3 seasons has concluded with a major cliffhanger. From a writing perspective, how important is it to know from the start just how you want to resolve that cliffhanger? Like, do you know, after the season 3 finale, do you know, when did you know how season 4 would pick up? And what can you obviously tease about that?
I mean, the basic math of it is pretty simple. You tell a big, long story, and then you tell the first chapter of another story, and that's the end of the season. So you have to have some sense of what that next story is that you're going to be pushing toward. It's a different landscape right now. It's not like, broadcast TV, if they make the first season and they like it, they're going to want to make 7 seasons because they're going to want to get to syndication. The environment isn't the economics don't work the same way. So Netflix has got to want to do another one of these. And I feel like I need to give both them and the audience a really concrete reason to come back. We're creating a situation that you still want to watch. And I take that seriously. I don't want people to walk away and feel like, oh, well, I liked that thing, but now it's over. And I don't want you to have to think, I don't know, do I want to go back to another season of that show? I sort of get it. I want there to be a reason that we're interested in more of the life of these characters. So every time we get to the point where we have to build one of these, we come up with an idea and I'm like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever verbalized. It always feels too big. It always feels too melodramatic. It feels silly. Like plot always feels silly until you have like enough detail and nuance and fact and granularity behind it. It just sounds so dumb. Like, how would anybody ever buy into that? And then the task is like building enough of a sandcastle around it that the audience is willing to go on that ride. I come into every season knowing where we're going and desperately hoping that we outdo that idea. And we have. Like, we've never done the idea that I had at the beginning of the season. We've done some iteration of it, but the hope is always that like you're in a writer's room with 6 or 8 other people and somebody comes up with something that's just better. And it's usually not me. So it's a great deal. And that's what I'm always rooting for.
So what can you tease about how season 4 opens and returns to the, when that comes next year?
Oh God, I'm trying to remember what season 3 was. We're in the middle of it right now. We're shooting the beginning of season 4 and we're writing the middle of season 4. And I always get a little bit disoriented.
Can you give us one teaser?
Oh shit, my mind is a blank, Lesley. Let me think of something for you. I guess what we're going into is we've sort of come out at the end of season 3 in this moment where, Kate realizes that she experimented with a life without Hal and didn't love it, and realized that that this was something that she wanted to go back to and really seriously commit to, and then what happens at the cliffhanger there is one of those moments comes that's always pulled her away and that's always pulled her out of the relationship. Something happens that makes her think, oh shit, this isn't just a bad thing, but like, you're a bad guy. And we go into the next season with her trying to figure out, like, is that true or is that her? Is that like a relationship defense mechanism? Like, we get too close, I see that my life is tied to you forever, and therefore you do something that I interpret as like fundamentally evil, or did you do a bad thing?
Right.
So that's kind of where we're taking off.
Season 3 separated the Wilders for long periods of time and
Yeah.
almost put an end to their marriage. But I'm curious about, for you and the writer's room, what is the debate like when it comes to how healthy Hal and Kate's marriage is? Or is this just flat out codependency?
That's funny. Somebody asked me that once, and then I ended up having like a long conversation about it with my husband and my son, where I was trying to explain to my son why I thought this was a healthy marriage. But here's why I think it's a healthy marriage. I think that when we're on the inside of a relationship or on the inside of a fight, it feels like whatever that other person is doing is in fact like fundamentally bad. Like, they're fundamentally, I'm like, you did not pick up the dry cleaning. It is because you are a bad person. And then like you step out of the fight and you're like, oh no, it's ridiculous. Oh, like we had another fight about the dry cleaning. And, those fights on TV are about people having extramarital affairs, But in life, the way that I hear them, it's like about you did or didn't change the oil. And the intensity with which we experience those things is real. And I think that the problem with Kate is that she expects that she's not going to, that she shouldn't feel this way. She shouldn't have a conflict with her husband and have that feeling of like, this is fundamentally unacceptable. She thinks that feeling is wrong. But like, what if that's just what it feels like to have a real conflict with somebody that you really love, where you don't necessarily believe the same things all the time? Like, isn't that just sort of like what the game is? Like, isn't that what being married is? Like, you are going to come upon things where you fundamentally disagree, and it will feel apocalyptic. And the game is, how do you figure out the difference between things that really are apocalyptic, a behavior that really is abusive or dangerous or destructive, and what's the fucking dry cleaning? You know, sometimes it's just the dry cleaning.
Exactly.
So I think they have an ordinary marriage. I think most marriages have a lot of moments like we see with Kate and Hal.
Yeah, except
So
we don't
is
have
it healthy? It's a little bit normcore, you know?
Yeah, except we don't have, the fate of the world hanging in the balance. It's, are you going to get the dry cleaning or not?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We do like to end
That one
things.
small change.
We do like to end things on a positive note, but obviously the industry has been going through a lot of growing pains of late, especially with the programming contraction. But for writers who are listening and watching this, what advice do you have for writers right now who may be struggling to get staffed somewhere? Or maybe even questioning if this is the right industry. I mean, we've heard stories and we've reported here at the Ankler so many things about people leaving the industry because of the struggles, because they can't get through, or they can't get promoted, or they're just stuck at an assistant level and can't earn a living.
I would say for writers, I think people spend a lot of time looking for work, networking, trying to position themselves to get work. And a lot of times in the beginning of the career, it's really just about writing, and it's about writing a lot. Like, I wasn't good at this when I started. It's the thing I was talking about before. I didn't like plot. Plot sounded stupid to me. I just liked cool little turns of phrase. And it took until like enough years at Grey's Anatomy where we just blew through so many stories so quickly, and something would happen and we would have to like knock it all down and start again. The facility with, letting go of a single idea, letting go of what you think is at the heart of your story and making it about something else over and over and over and over and over again, that remains really hard to do. And people who can do that get jobs. And it's a repetition game in so many ways. It's a quantity game. It's how quickly can you produce a new story that you can find a way to connect to and not feel like there's a single element that's holding up your old story that you can't do without. Everybody's still looking for people who can do that and do it fast.
Well, that brings us to the end of our interview. Thank you so much for joining Ankler Media's Showrunner Sessions, Debora, to talk about The Diplomat.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.